Welcome to the InitiativeOne Leadership Podcast, where we help leaders maximize their impact and transform their lives. Hello, my name is Dr. Fred Johnson. I'm the founder here at InitiativeOne, and I am honored to have my friend and colleague as our special guest, Dr. Phil Ertl. Dr. Ertl is with us today. He left a very, very successful career as an administrator, superintendent of a very prominent school district here in the state of Wisconsin. He's made the move. He is now already helping us to experience tremendous success as the head of our education division here at InitiativeOne. And Phil, we are delighted, and I am delighted to have you as my guest, and I want to learn from you today. So as we start, can you tell us a little bit about your history? Why? I mean, you had it made. You could have stayed as long as you wanted in your previous position, and yet you came here and made a huge change. What fueled that?
Well, I think there was a couple things that fueled it. An opportunity to make a change in my career was one. Providing impact. My purpose is providing impact, and the opportunity to provide impact in a different way by working at InitiativeOne is something I was looking forward to. I had spent 20-some years as a superintendent, 16 in my last district, and it was time, not only time for the district to have new leadership, but time for me to move into a different direction. I had said I was going to stay 16 years when I started to get my kids through one school system. I did that. And now the opportunity for me to step into another career and really provide impact, and it's been nothing short of fantastic.
So we know today that the typical person will change jobs in their career from beginning to end up to 7 times and up to 3 different careers. And so there are a lot of folks out there who really want to try something new, but they're scared to death to try it. And I imagine you went through a whole plethora of emotions and questions. Was it scary when you stepped out? And if it was, why?
There was some hesitation. Obviously, as you've done one thing for a long period of time, saying you step into a different role, a different position, different responsibilities. I tried not to think about it too much and just felt like I was going to get good guidance. I was just going to step into it and take my chances. I've been a calculated risk taker my whole life. So this, as you get older, obviously a little bit more calculated with your decisions. But I knew that I felt like I could provide what InitiativeOne needed and be able to make a difference here. And I think I've been able to, and I'm really enjoying it.
When you made the move, I mean, one of the things that I'm just already picking up is that really it's your ability to believe in yourself that is the key for reducing the anxiety so that you can increase your focus when you make such a major transition, and you've modeled that. I know you've been very, very successful. We were talking prior to this. You're one of the most humble men and modest men that I know, and you really didn't want me to share this, but I'm going to. You were awarded at the White House by President Obama for your excellence as a superintendent in technology and being a future leader. What was that experience like?
It was pretty awesome. The opportunity to meet the president, to be in a room with him at the White House, to have some recognition for our school district. I always looked at it, it's not me, it's the whole team doing it. I happened to be in the seat that got the recognition, but I was honored, very honored to be there.
So I've established the point that you're someone who has an outstanding track record. And yet along the way, not everything was perfect. Like for all of us. When you look back and you could say, is there anything that I would do different? That if I were to have an opportunity like this to teach a young leader, perhaps for him or her to learn some shortcuts based on your experience so that it would accelerate their growth, accelerate their level of effectiveness, accelerate their impact. Could you talk about 3 things that you would do differently after a long and very effective career?
So I would first say I don't think there's any shortcuts. There's ways to accelerate, like you said, to accelerate growth. You know, I always said I don't live with regrets in my career. I don't live with regrets in the past, but in some ways that's it might have been part of my strength, but also part of my weakness. Because by saying I don't live with regrets means you don't reflect back on what went well, what didn't go well, and you basically choose to ignore things that didn't go well. But I think all of my growth was built out of mistakes I've made in the past and adversity I've faced throughout my life.
So if we know today that self-reflection, basically the ability to evaluate, to monitor, and to come up with new ways to be better, if we know that self-reflection is so critical today in the life of a leader, why did you struggle with it? Why did you see it as almost a weakness or something that was not necessary?
It's frame of mind. It was how I looked at things. My way of thinking got in the way. And I was really good at not being vulnerable, keeping people away. I used to joke and call it the Heisman. But if I could keep people away, I wouldn't ultimately get hurt and wouldn't get burned. In fact, it was just the opposite. And I mean, that's one of those things. If I could go back, I'd be much more vulnerable and be much more open, because you as a leader, you talk about impact, right? And I think you just have more impact when you're more vulnerable and more authentic. And that's what we talk about with InitiativeOne all the time. And that's certainly something I would do differently, but self-reflection is something I would do as well. I used to joke about self-reflection. I mean, that was the thing, like
it was like self-reflection. It was a point of weakness.
Yeah.
Soft.
It's soft, it's fluffy.
Yep.
Kind of like meditation, all those kinds of things that I do now. Yeah. And, you know, if I was talking to a 25-year-old leader, and every time I work with one of our groups, I tell them if I would have, and maybe at the time when I was 25, I wasn't ready to really look deep inside myself. But if I could have gone through some of these experiences earlier in my career, would have had a profound impact on me and how I lived my life and how I operated as a leader in schools and outside of schools.
So I'm hearing you say there are 2 things so far. One is the ability to evaluate, to slow down, to look at oneself. How do I get better? How do I improve? How do I correct mistakes? Not in a shaming fashion, but in an evaluation fashion. And I'm also hearing you say that keeping people, you call it the Heisman, at a distance somehow makes you safe. But what we now know today is it really leaves you in isolation, because today people are drawn to leaders who are real and vulnerable. And when a person is not willing to be vulnerable, what they're really saying is, I don't trust you. And people pick up on that. You can't fool people long. And human nature is, if you send messages that you don't trust them, they won't trust you either. And so knowing that, you are sabotaging, you thought you were making things safe for you as a leader, but you are actually sabotaging yourself as a leader. Would that be an accurate statement?
A very accurate statement. Yeah, you don't realize it when you're in the throes of it. And school administration, like a lot of leadership positions, it's that constant wheel going. And until you specifically take those steps to put time in to do those types of things, to be reflective and to be vulnerable and to not hold. I mean, that takes thought process to do, not just the daily grind of doing the work. It's got to be something you got to think about doing, and it's got to be a way of thinking that you go about to be successful with it.
So let's look at the pragmatic side of that. We know that people in general in our society have radically changed in terms of their ability to deal with conflict, their ability to manage stress, their ability to handle decent conversations when they're upset or they disagree with people. And so you're going to see largely as a society, we're looking at people's less than best self. And yet I'm asking you, would you be more vulnerable? And you said absolutely, which opened yourself up to a lot of barbs, a lot of arrows, a lot of inappropriate statements. How do you handle that as a leader when that begins to happen if you're committed to vulnerability?
It's just information. I mean, that's how you tell yourself it's just information. It's not about me. It's just information, and you take it as such. And if there's information that you can use to learn and grow, and through adversity to grow, absolutely.
So we talk about that one of the skills of a highly effective leader is being able to take critical information, critical comments, critical behaviors, inappropriate behaviors from other people directed towards you. We talk about turning it into data, taking the personalization out of it and seeing it as data. Have you found that has been effective for you?
That has worked. And it also kind of relates to positive intent. When you think about positive intent, for example, parents are passionate, and you're working in a school district, parents are passionate. Sometimes in administration, you get some unhappy parents. Oftentimes, they may come in and they may, either on the phone or in person, they're not their best self, right? They're not. And you know that you change that mindset and saying, they're not keeping the good ones home and sending the bad kids to school. Like, these are the ones they have. They're doing the best they can, and they want the best for their children. They're just going to do it differently than some other people or me, and I understand that. And that helps me operate at that. Those kind of thought processes help me operate at a different level.
So we're asking leaders today to do something that in my day as a young leader would have been seen as unwise. We're asking people, instead of keeping people at a distance, through being open and real and authentic, to draw people in. We're asking people to be vulnerable instead of the appearance that I want a relationship with you, but I really don't. And that's a major, major shift. And yet I'm hearing you say that one of the keys for you is developing a mindset at the onset of your relationship. And we're talking about a mindset that when someone's coming in, it's a mindset of, I am going to choose to see that this person is coming from a place of positive intent. They mean no harm. They may be harmful, but they mean no harm. They're coming from a good place.
Right.
What if they're not? Are you being unwise by telling yourself positive intent?
No. I think I'll just remain with the positive intent. I mean, and maybe, you know what? Maybe sometimes people didn't have positive intent, and it was personal, but it's not about, it's what I receive and how I receive it. Sometimes when people talk, it says more about them than what they're trying to communicate. I understand that.
We talk about that no one can ultimately disrespect us. Someone may be trying to be disrespectful to us, But ultimately, if someone's being disrespectful to me, they're really giving me more information about themselves than they're giving me the information that they want me to know. And so it's constant self-awareness, as we've talked about. What's my mindset? And if you raise your game and the other person is not raising their game, you're still better off. You're still going to have the odds of having a much better outcome. And so it really doesn't matter what the response of the other person is. I'm hearing you say it's all about you taking responsibility for you, your approach, your self-talk, your mindset that really determines better outcomes. Am I hearing that correctly?
Absolutely. And I think it's when you, even in communication, when I communicate, I'm 100% responsibility for, I take 100% responsibility for what I say. I deliver in a kind, direct, and respectful manner, but I'm not responsible for how it's received. Now, people can certainly weaponize that and not be kind, they can be direct and they can skip the kind and respectful part when they communicate, but certainly I can't be responsible for how the information is received the best I can do. And that's really about maintaining what we talk about in Initiative One, is trying to be my 8.0 self, being my best self. So that's what you try to work on. And I've grown a lot, especially in the last 2 years, and that's what's been exciting. I've probably talked to myself more in the last 2 years than I did the first 50 some years I've been around.
Yeah.
But it's healthy. It's important to do, and certainly learn that what we do has an impact, certainly on me.
You know, you're in a unique situation. Most of my career, being a boomer, was lived in the era that you're the leader, tell people what to do, and they better darn well do it. And if they don't, get rid of them. And it was really command and control. I'm the Marine sergeant. And if you don't do something, there's hell to pay. It was a pretty direct command and control. And yet we've also learned that doesn't work today except in moments of crisis. And even after the crisis is over, that person has to shift back into a relationship-based leadership approach, or they create a new kind of crisis from within that they created. So you've seen a major shift in your earlier career. You were the authority and people did what you asked to do. And yet at the back end...
Or didn't.
And on the back end, it was completely different. Could you describe the shift that you've seen in how you lead today? And that's the third thing I'd ask you to talk about, that what would you do differently as a leader to drive much greater effectiveness?
Yeah, my training was similar. It was command and control, and you're the boss, you take charge, and you make decisions, and people follow your decisions. But I learned pretty early on that doesn't work. And you know what I also find interesting is that we know. I mean, back then it might have been, there might be a different way, but right now we know there's a different way to do it and a better way to do it, yet we still have people that are into leading the way they were led many, many years ago. And we know that the newer generations, if it's really about impact and really about influence, we want to have, that's the part where how do you get an organization to change? That's really what a leader's job is. You're trying to deal with change minute by minute by minute. You're constantly dealing with change. And to have effective change, you need people to make the change. It can't be you doing it. I go back and I think, who are the thoughtful leaders? We all know who our thoughtful leaders are in our organization.
Could you explain thoughtful leaders?
Sure. Thoughtful leaders are those people that you could call them the informal leaders of your organization. They're the ones that have influence over anywhere from 12 to 18 people. And when they say yes, those other people follow along because this person said it's the right thing to do, and they believe in them because of who they are. And really knowing who those, I think we all know who those people are, and I always knew who those were. I didn't do an effective enough job engaging them in decision making because truly, who runs your organization? It's your thoughtful leaders. It's not you at the top. It's the people that have the input, have the influence that they influence. Parents in the community, in a school district, but certainly in any organization, your thoughtful leaders have control of the culture of your organization.
You know, big shifts. And we know today that leadership, as you're describing, is really about building true, authentic relationships and enlisting people as partners, not as gophers that will follow your direction. And so it's no longer about the leader as himself or herself. It's now about the leader as the ability to cultivate partners through genuine relationship. Now, John Maxwell, in his classic works, has talked about level 2 leadership, which is leadership by relationship. But even that has changed since he started talking about that in the 70s. Relationship was, I like you. I think I want to hang out with you some more. Or at least I'm not going to oppose you. Hey, let's take our team bowling. Hey, let's do a potluck. Let's go do a ropes course. Let's have fun together. And that's relationship building. I think that has radically changed. Relationship building today is not, hey, do I merely like you, but do I know you? And do you know me? And it's much deeper. It's much more courageous. How would you respond to the shift that I'm describing? What changes have you had to make in order to become comfortable with that kind of a leadership essential today?
Again, it's mindset. It had to shift. And the hard part is when you go through it, even though it's a major change, it's when do you truly recognize that things are changing? And if you're not self-aware, you're not reflective, you're not going to catch it. And that's where I think some people still are at. But it's challenging because you're changing how you operate. You're being vulnerable. You're taking those chances personally to put yourself out there and put who you are out to other people. And you're taking risks that something bad may happen, because that's that mindset. And it's when you change it. And we're no different than anybody else. We try something, and if we get a positive response from it, we're going to do it again, right? So, you start trying and taking small risks, small pivots, like we talk about, and small pivots in those kind of relationships as well. Relationships are different. It's not for the goal of, hey, let's be friends. Now it's about getting results too. It's like we can have a good relationship, but ultimately we're going to have some sideways accountability. We're going to make sure we all are getting positive results as well. So we're going to keep pushing toward that.
And we know that there are three kinds of accountability. There's downward accountability, which is traditional and it's the least effective. There's upward, which is my reports giving me the feedback that I need, and I've given them the expectation and the permission to be honest. But we also know the most powerful form of accountability is sideways or peer-to-peer accountability. But that is that's a big leap for most people. And it goes back to this relationship thing that we've been talking about, that ultimately, one, I am not going to receive accountability from you if you haven't poured water into my well, or else it's just information. If you and I have been through ups and downs, if we have spent time really getting to know each other and investing in each other, I'm going to receive that accountability completely different because it's that positive intent. I know where you're coming from. And so even accountability cannot happen today without that absolute courageous approach that I am going to open myself up to my team, to those that I lead, They're going to know my story. They're going to know my mistakes. They're going to know my fears. They're going to know my apprehensions. Because ultimately, if you appear perfect, I mean, how does it feel when you're around someone that it looks like they've got their act together, that they have arrived? I mean, how do you think today's people respond to that?
Not very well. There's a hesitancy and a skepticism that there's something else behind the curtain that they're hiding. And I think that oftentimes that is the case. Nobody has their act all together. And if you try to act like you have your act all together, you're a liar.
Yeah.
It's just not the case. I mean, I've seen it in the last 2 years of the people that we work with and the people that we end up not working with. There's some people that think they've arrived and they're where they want to be and they're doing good enough. And like the people we tend to work with are really good, but they just want to keep getting better. I mean, that's the mindset in relationship to all of this. And at the base of it all is really about trust. How do you build trust with someone if you're not going to be vulnerable and open and honest? And the old idea is just trust me, right? Guaranteed I won't trust you if you're going to throw that statement at me. So taking that different approach of really trying to build trust and trying to emulate behaviors that build trust, not that take trust away.
So we talked about thoughtful leaders a moment ago. What happens? First of all, how do you win over the support of a thoughtful leader? Because your thoughtful leaders basically lead the organization. We talk about bandwagoneers, which are the 50 to 60% of people who come because of a job. And they have the least level of loyalty to the organization of anyone, but they still want to be recognized. And we know that they highly respect thoughtful leaders, and they'll go the way the thoughtful leader is going. How do you win the trust of a thoughtful leader, that person who has an influence pool of 12 to 18 people?
Yeah, I wouldn't describe it as trying to win them over or trying to win them, because if you're doing that,
they're going to get,
sounds like it, right? They're going to hold you back.
It's a technique. It's a gimmick.
Right. You're doing this for you truly don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, so you're spending time actually getting to know them. I mean, and truly wanting to do it. And again, we understand. I know when people are trying to get to know me for the wrong reasons. I spent my whole life dealing with that. They're trying to influence you versus trying to create a true relationship because you truly understand. They hold the keys to your car.
So they also have to know that you genuinely win. My favorite question to a thoughtful leader in a meeting, whether it's a formal meeting or most of my meetings with thoughtful leaders were over coffee at a coffee house. My favorite question to a thoughtful leader is two things. How are you? And number two, what are you thinking? What does that say? What do those simple, if sincere questions do to buy the allegiance of the thoughtful leader that if they're on board with you, they are going to pull a lot of people on board as well?
Well, it tells them that you want to hear from them and you care. Because ultimately, if you want a thoughtful leader to go south, they're going to take those 12 to 18 people and they're going to be negative with them. And the way you do that is you don't keep them engaged and you don't value what they have to say and you don't listen to them.
But what if you disagree? What if you can't do what they're asking you to do because of circumstances that they may not be aware of and you can't share, or they may not have the natural leadership skills to understand why they can't go in the direction that they want you to go in, but you can't go? What do you do in those moments?
Well, if you've built up enough trust prior to that, then when you'd say, I can't share the information, and this is why I can't share the information, but here's why we're making the decision, they're going to be okay with that. If you constantly veto what they're thinking or their ideas, that's not going to be healthy. Eventually they're going to say something's not right here, and then trust is going to be broken. But You don't want to go to that well way too many times. But if you build up enough trust with the people you work with and you have to veto a decision, they're going to respect that because they respect you and respect your decision making. But if you haven't built that up and you come in guns a-blazing, I mean, it's going to be a different story. So it takes that. I mean, that's why trust is so important. I don't know that there's a whole lot you can do successfully if you don't have trust built up in an organization.
So I'm going to ask you one more question. I was taught to believe that failure means you're a failure. If you're a really great leader, you're going to fail very little. We know today that that's simply not true. In fact, there is a direct relationship to the height of your success and the depths of your failure that you've experienced. And you can't know the heights if you haven't experienced the depths. Can you describe one experience, and you're talking about vulnerability, can you describe one experience that you look back and you saw it as a failure, but over time, that failure and what you gained from that failure propelled you to a place that it was actually, you didn't know it at the time, but it was a great win. Can you think of any experience in your career that would have fit that mold?
I think there's a lot, but I think I've also been fortunate enough to really look at things as like mistakes and failures are opportunities for growth, and maybe it's because I've made so many. So I don't have a lot of mistakes that I've made that I look back and say, I could have done this differently and grown. I'd be a fool to say there isn't something, but over time, how I look at mistakes, what's so important to me is that people understand making mistakes are critical, and they're critical for growth. One of the questions I would ask all of our incoming teachers when I would interview everyone, that I only asked 2 questions, and one of them was, how do you feel about adversity? And the other was, tell me how you feel about this statement, and that failure is critical to success, because I strongly believe that. And their answers would be, a lot of people really understood failure and understood adversity, how important it is, because that's what we do in education. That's what we do in most organizations. It's about growing. So, there's my approach to it. I think that was taught to me early on, that failure is not about you personally. Failure is a mistake. But I've had times where I've fallen into those traps and worked my way through them. And how do you work through it? You work through it with people that you trust.
I said I had one more question, but I think I got one more question.
1B.
1B. As a superintendent, you're constantly approached from email, from text, from phone calls, from people meeting you, being introduced, all kinds of folks out there who are leadership gurus, the magic pill that's going to come in and change your district. And most superintendents are, at least initially, are very leery about anyone in our field. What has your experience been? You brought us in years ago in your own district, and you wouldn't be here if you hadn't witnessed what had happened. What would you say to a superintendent that you benefited from as a superintendent, and what makes what we're doing significantly powerful?
The first thing I would say is call anybody that's gone through the process besides me. Anybody that we've worked with in the last 2 years, and have a conversation with them. But what's been amazing for me in this last 2 years is seeing progress from a different point of view. So I used to love mowing lawn as a superintendent because you actually could see progress. Because day to day, you don't necessarily get to see those changes. And when it's human behavior, you don't always see a drastic change. It's over time until all of a sudden, next thing you know, you realize we're in a better place. I've been able to see it. So if we go monthly and meet with some of our teams, to be able to see the growth, the vulnerability, the changes, and how these teams come together, whether it's the individual growth or the team growth, has just been gives me goosebumps every time I think about it.
Well, that sounds like a bunch of soft rah-rah. I mean, is it because they hold hands all of a sudden, or is it because the impact of the trust that they develop, their decisions get better?
A big impact and a big part of what we do is through trust accelerators, behaviors that produce positive results when it comes to trust. And when a team develops and lives by their trust accelerators, that in itself is going to change the culture of an organization, because it opens doors that have never been opened before. And like I said, in the last 2 years, I've been able to see that from a different perspective, because, yeah, again, we go maybe once a month, or we go back, and all of a sudden, the next thing, you're realizing somebody made a dramatic change in the past month.
So you don't have to be riding a lawnmower now in what you're doing to see pretty deep, dramatic change right in front of your eyes.
It's pretty amazing, and it's incredibly powerful when you see it. I don't know, for me, it's not like anything I've seen before, and to see that happen and to know that we've had some kind of impact on that, it's really not about InitiativeOne. It's not about us. It's about people making really difficult decisions. So fortunately, we're working with people that want to get better, and to get better, you got to make some different decisions. And when some of the leaders that we work with make those kind of decisions, it's pretty eye-opening and powerful.
Well, Phil, I want to say it is a privilege to have you as a teammate. You have already in 2 years had a profound, powerful impact upon our organization, the growth of our organization, the people that we're interfacing with on a daily basis. We're thankful for your wisdom. We're thankful for your practical insights and your leadership, and it truly is my honor to have you with us today.
Thank you. It's truly an honor to be here and working here, and one of the best decisions I've made in my life, so thank you.
Thank you. I want to say to each of you, thank you for listening in to our podcast. I'm going to ask you to consider a couple of things. Number one, we do a monthly think tank. It's complimentary. It's a gift that we provide to the leadership community. You can access that by going to our website and registering for that think tank. We'd also ask that if you're interested in doing deeper, significant work that is truly transformational for your team, for your organization, and for your leaders, go to our website at InitiativeOne.com. Check us out. If you're interested, send us a message that you'd like to know more, and we'd be delighted to share that information. Again, I want to say thank you. If you've enjoyed this, we'd appreciate you referring us, sharing this, giving us a like, and we appreciate your belief in us and your support. It means the world to us. Have a great day, and we'll see you again.